The village of Emberfall rested in the gentle curve of a wide valley, embraced by the towering evergreen peaks. Its cobblestone streets glimmered with the morning dew, and smoke spiraled lazily from chimneys, carrying the scent of baked bread and pinewood fires. To the outside world, Emberfall seemed insignificant, a dot on old maps easily overlooked. To the humans who lived there, it was home. Lyra, a young blacksmith with hands scarred by fire and resolve, walked through the narrow streets carrying a small basket of tools. Her amber eyes reflected the sunlight as she passed neighbors, some tending gardens, others chasing laughing children. Life here was simple, safe, predictable, but Lyra always felt a restlessness beneath the quiet, as if the mountains themselves were whispering secrets the village was not ready to hear. At the village square, the oldest inhabitant, Elder Thomas, sat on a worn wooden bench. His silver beard swayed in the morning breeze, and his eyes, pale as frost, held stories no book could contain. He waved at Lyra. "Good morning, child," he said, voice soft but steady. "You feel it too, don't you? The silence that doesn't belong?" Lyra paused. She had learned to trust the elder's intuition, even when it sounded like a gentle warning. "I feel it," she admitted, setting the basket down. "It's like the air itself is waiting." A low, distant rumble interrupted them. Not thunder, though the clouds were still far away. It vibrated through the stones underfoot. People stopped their work. Dogs barked. Children clung to their mothers. Elder Thomas rose slowly. "It begins," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. By evening, the truth became impossible to ignore. Across the horizon, dark silhouettes moved in a coordinated wave. Not a storm. Not birds. Soldiers, strange, tall, and armed with technology that made the air sizzle with a faint hum. The village had never seen anything like it. Panic fluttered in hearts, but Lyra's instincts anchored her. She ran to the blacksmith forge where her father once worked, and began hammering metal with a rhythm born of necessity. Sparks danced like stars around her, reflecting determination in her eyes. "We may be small, but we are not helpless," she said aloud, more to herself than anyone. Neighbors gathered, fear etched in every line of their faces. Some spoke of surrender, of fleeing, but Lyra shook her head. "This is our home," she said, voice firm. "If they want Emberfall, they'll have to face us." Elder Thomas emerged from the shadows, leaning on his staff. "Humans have survived because of spirit, not strength," he said. "The world underestimates our resolve. Remember this." By the nightfall, the villagers organized. Farmers became sentinels, blacksmiths reinforced doors, and children helped carry supplies. Each person worked as though guided by some ancient memory of survival. Lyra climbed the hill overlooking the village, overlooking the valley where the approaching soldiers now glimmered in the moonlight, their strange devices scanning the land. A chill ran down her spine, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce determination. "They think this is just a village," she whispered, gripping a hammer like a sword. "But we will show them. Humans are never just ordinary." Somewhere deep in the mountains, a distant echo of wind seemed almost like a sigh, as if the peaks themselves were watching, waiting. Emberfall, fragile yet unyielding, began its transformation, not by walls of stone alone, but by the unshakable will of those who refused to bow. As the first star appeared in the twilight sky, Lyra turned to see her neighbors, tired, fearful, yet unbroken. "Tomorrow," she said, eyes blazing, "we begin the impossible." And in that moment, Emberfall was no longer a mere village. It was the seat of a fortress, a testament to human courage, and the world had not yet seen what it was about to awaken. The first light of dawn painted the evergreen peaks in shades of gold and rose. Emberfall, though small, was no longer the sleepy village it had been. The air hummed with urgency, each heartbeat in rhythm with hammers striking metal and saws carving wood. Fear lingered like a shadow, but determination burned brighter. Lyra worked tirelessly in the forge, shaping iron into weapons and reinforcements. Sparks flew like fireflies, reflecting in her amber eyes. She felt the weight of responsibility, yet it was familiar. Humans thrived under pressure, and she had always known that Emberfall's strength would not come from walls alone, but from the people who called it home. Around her, the villagers moved as one. Farmers carried planks of wood, weaving them into barricades along narrow streets. Children gathered stones for slings and traps, their small hands nimble and eager to contribute. Even the elderly, once thought fragile, offered counsel and guidance, mapping weak points in the village's natural defenses. Elder Thomas walked among them, his presence both calming and commanding. "Listen well," he instructed, voice carrying over the clamor. "Strength is not always steel. Ingenuity, unity, and courage are our greatest weapons. Watch, learn, and remember. The world has underestimated humanity before. It will not again." In the center of the village, Lyra met with Joran, a tall, wiry farmer with hands calloused from seasons of toil. Together, they devised clever traps using farming tools, hidden pits, and clever false paths. "If they think they can storm our streets without thought, they'll find themselves lost," Joran said, a grim smile tugging at his lips. As the day wore on, distant figures appeared on the horizon. Scouts from the approaching army moved cautiously, unaware of the subtle traps being laid. Lyra's chest tightened, but not from fear. From deep within, she drew a steady resolve. Humans were unpredictable, capable of creativity that no machine, no soldier could fully anticipate. By midday, the villagers' efforts began to take shape. Barricades reinforced weak walls. Narrow alleys were filled with pitfalls. Rooftops were prepared as vantage points. Families worked together, often in silence, communicating with gestures and brief words. A quiet pride settled over Emberfall, the knowledge that they were creating something extraordinary from ordinary lives. Still, doubt lingered in hearts. Mira, a young healer, paused by the river, her reflection trembling in the water. She thought of her younger brother, often sick and frail, wondering if he could endure what was coming. Elder Thomas found her there. "Fear is not weakness," he said gently. "It is the seed of courage waiting to bloom. You care so deeply because you understand what is precious. That understanding makes you strong." Night approached faster than anyone noticed. The army's silhouettes grew larger, their hum of machines echoing faintly across the valley. Emberfall's defenders were ready, but they were human, vulnerable and aware that a single misstep could bring ruin. Yet there was a fire in their eyes, a quiet defiance that would not bend. Lyra climbed to the highest rooftop, surveying the village below. Every barricade, every trap, every carefully placed obstacle was a testament to their resilience. She clenched her fists. "They think they know us," she whispered. But they have not counted on human spirit. The first distant whistle sounded, a signal from the advancing army. Shadows lengthened across the valley, and a cold wind carried the distant metallic scent of their machines. The villagers braced themselves, hearts synchronized in a silent promise. Emberfall would not fall without a fight. In that tense, electric silence, something remarkable happened. Children who had been watching the preparations suddenly took the lead in small ways, scouting hidden paths, relaying messages, even suggesting clever diversions. The adults marveled, realizing that human ingenuity did not belong to the strongest or oldest. It belonged to anyone willing to think, act, and hope. As stars began to appear in the sky, Emberfall glowed not as a village, but as a fortress of living will. Every heartbeat was a drum of defiance, every pair of eyes a spark of hope. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the peaks, the approaching army paused, sensing that this would not be a simple conquest. They had underestimated humanity before. Here in a quiet valley, they would learn the true meaning of resistance. Lyra lowered herself to the rooftop's edge, feeling the wind on her face. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we show them that humans are never ordinary." The village held its breath, and Emberfall, small but unyielding, waited for dawn. Dawn broke over Emberfall with a quiet, deceptive calm. Mist curled between the cobblestones and birds sang as if nothing were amiss, but the villagers knew better. Every heartbeat carried tension, every breath a reminder that the army looming beyond the valley was unlike anything they had faced. Lyra stood atop the forge roof, her hammer strapped to her back, eyes scanning the distant line of soldiers. They moved deliberately, their machines humming faintly, lights blinking in a rhythm that unnerved the most seasoned villagers. Yet she did not feel fear. She felt resolve, the kind that comes from knowing your home is worth any cost. The first movement came unexpectedly. A small scouting unit approached the village outskirts, confident and unknowing. Joran, crouched behind a hastily reinforced barricade, signaled with a nod to Lyra. The trap they had set, a simple pit covered with wooden planks and weighted by stones, was ready. As the scouts stepped over the edge, the ground gave way. Shouts erupted, followed by clattering arms and the hum of activated machinery. The villagers watched from hidden positions, hearts pounding but spirits unbroken. The humans of Emberfall had prepared for this moment, not just with weapons but with strategy, patience, and instinct. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. "Remember, keep low." Hues every corner. Children darted from shadow to shadow, relaying messages and distractions. Mira moved swiftly among the wounded, her hands steady as she applied bandages and comfort. Every villager played a role, no matter their age or strength. The invaders hesitated, surprised by the complexity of the traps and the villagers' coordination. They had underestimated the humans' ability to adapt. Lyra realized then that the greatest weapon Emberfall possessed was not the iron in their hands but the minds that guided it. By midday, the clash escalated. Stones, arrows, and cleverly hidden mechanisms slowed the enemy advance. Roofs became observation points. Hidden crossways allowed villagers to strike and vanish before retaliation. Elder Thomas, standing on the highest hill, guided the movements with calm authority, his voice carrying across the battlefield like a whisper of fate. "Do not let fear decide your actions," he called. "Think, adapt, survive. Humans have outlasted storms and wars because we never rely on strength alone." Even as the soldiers adjusted, the villagers improvised. Lyra led a small group to flank the advancing units using smoke and mirrors, simple fires and mirrors to confuse and blind. The soldiers faltered, unfamiliar with the unpredictability of human tactics. One by one, they were forced back, their discipline no match for Emberfall's ingenuity. Still, there were losses. The village felt the sting of pain and fear. A young boy stumbled, frightened by a sudden attack, and a farmer caught an arrow meant for another. Mira's hands shook, but she did not falter, attending to each wound with gentle efficiency. Every life mattered, and the villagers protected one another fiercely, refusing to let despair take root. By evening, the valley echoed with silence again. Emberfall had held the soldiers retreating beyond sight, confused and cautious. The village's streets were quiet except for the soft steps of humans checking their defenses, tending the injured and whispering words of encouragement. Lyra looked over the square, at neighbors exhausted but alive. Her chest swelled with pride and relief. They had faced the first test and survived, not through sheer power but through courage, planning, and unbreakable spirit. Elder Thomas approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Today, Emberfall proved something important," he said. "Humans are underestimated because the world forgets how resourceful we can be. But we are never just ordinary. Never forget that." As the sun dipped behind the peaks, Lyra and the villagers began repairing damage and reinforcing barricades. Each nail hammered and each stone placed was a promise. Emberfall would endure. They were small, yes, but they were human, brilliant, relentless, and unyielding. Lyra gazed toward the distant army's campfires flickering faintly in the night. She clenched her fists. "They think this is just a village," she whispered. "Tomorrow they'll learn it's a fortress." And in the quiet of Emberfall under the first rising moon, the village stood alive with human will. They had faced the first storm and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The morning sun rose over Emberfall with a promise of vigilance. The village had survived the first assault, but every heartbeat carried the knowledge that the enemy would return, stronger, wiser, and more determined. The villagers knew that survival required more than courage. It required transformation. Emberfall was no longer just a home, it had to become a fortress. Lyra walked through the streets, noting every weak wall, narrow alley, and vulnerable gate. Her hammer, now polished and heavy with new purpose, swung loosely at her side. She had learned in the first skirmish that courage alone could not protect them. Foresight and preparation were equally vital. "Everyone to the square." Elder Thomas's voice rang out. Even his tone carried urgency. Today, Emberfall builds not just walls, but a testament to human ingenuity. The villagers gathered, listening intently. Jorn and Lyra laid out the plan. Barricades reinforced with timber and iron, hidden tunnels connecting rooftops, and traps placed in deceptive patterns along every path into the village. Each family had a role. Some would fortify gates, others would maintain the weapons, and children, clever and nimble, would serve as runners and scouts. Mira stood among the crowd, tending to those still recovering from the previous day's injuries. She caught sight of Lyra and offered a nod of reassurance. "We can do this," Mira said softly. "Because we must." By midday, the transformation began in earnest. Farmers wielded hammers as skillfully as swords, stacking stones and reinforcing walls. Blacksmiths forged not only weapons, but pulleys and contraptions that could swing logs or drop barriers at a moment's notice. Women who had once tilled fields or cooked meals became engineers of defense, calculating angles and testing mechanisms with precision. Lyra moved from group to group, her voice firm but encouraging. Think like them but act differently. They have machines, yes, but we have minds. That is our advantage. They will never predict what a human can imagine. The village children ran along rooftops carrying messages and small supplies. Their laughter, once carefree, now carried purpose. Even in fear, they had discovered the thrill of contributing to something larger than themselves. Lyra watched as a boy barely 10 years old carefully positioned a pulley to drop a basket of stones onto a path below. The simplicity of the action belied its brilliance. Elder Thomas observed from a hilltop, noting each individual's effort. "Humans are not just survivors," he murmured. "We are architects of hope, even in the face of overwhelming odds." As evening approached, Emberfall had changed. Streets once open and vulnerable now twisted with barriers and false paths. Hidden pits and traps dotted the outskirts. The rooftops bristled with vantage points, and small fires glimmered in controlled patterns to confuse potential scouts. Each measure was a blend of ingenuity and human determination, designed to make the village unassailable, not just by force, but by unpredictability. The villagers worked tirelessly, yet exhaustion never broke their spirit. There were moments of doubt. A child cried quietly, a farmer faltered under the weight of stone, a mother whispered fears to her daughter. Yet each time someone was there to lift spirits, to remind them why Emberfall could not fall. Lyra climbed to the tallest roof, surveying the valley below. In the distance, the enemy's encampment flickered like scattered stars. The soldiers were regrouping, likely planning their next move. But the village, once simple and peaceful, now pulsed with a quiet, formidable energy. Every heartbeat, every glance, every whispered word among neighbors was a thread in the fortress they were weaving together. Night fell, bringing a hush over Emberfall. Fires burned steadily, lighting paths for the night watch. Lyra and Joran inspected the gates, ensuring every lock and reinforcement was secure. Mira moved silently among the wounded, her hands steady, her eyes reflecting the determination of all who had survived. Elder Thomas approached Lyra, his expression calm but intense. "Do you see, child?" he said. "They thought this was a village, but now it is something else, something alive, something humans built not merely to resist but to endure." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and pride. She glanced at the rooftops, the walls, and the bustling streets below. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we show them what humans are capable of when they refuse to be ordinary." And in the quiet of Emberfall, the valley held its breath. The village had become more than stone and timber. It had become a symbol of human ingenuity, courage, and unyielding spirit. And the world beyond the peaks would soon learn that underestimating humanity came at a cost. Dawn arrived with a trembling light that barely pierced the morning mist. Emberfall, now a maze of barricades, traps, and hidden pathways, was alive with anticipation. The villagers moved with quiet urgency, carrying weapons, reinforcing walls, and scanning the horizon. Today, the army beyond the valley would test them fully. Lyra stood atop the tallest roof, her amber eyes tracing the approaching soldiers. Hundreds moved in formation, their machines glinting under the weak sunlight. The village had prepared, but the enormity of the force sent a shiver through even the bravest hearts. Yet fear had become fuel, sharpening minds instead of weakening them. Elder Thomas, standing on the hill, addressed the gathered villagers. "Remember what we are," he said, voice carrying over the tense hush. "They see Emberfall as a village, but we are humans. They will underestimate our courage, our cunning, and our will to survive. Strike wisely, act boldly, and trust each other." The first clash began unexpectedly. A group of soldiers attempted to breach the eastern gate, only to fall into a concealed pit reinforced with sharpened stakes. Shouts echoed through the valley as more soldiers were caught in clever snares. Logs suspended from rooftops, nets hidden in alleys, and barricades that channeled attackers into narrow corridors. Lyra moved among the rooftops, directing small teams of defenders. "Push forward carefully. Keep them from regrouping. Use every advantage," she commanded, her voice calm but commanding. Each maneuver displayed not brute force but human ingenuity, tactics no machine or strategy could fully anticipate. In the streets, villagers fought with a mixture of courage and creativity. Joran rolled a heavy cart along a narrow alley, tipping it at just the right moment to block enemy reinforcements. Children ran messages from one lookout to another, their small forms darting between shadows, delivering critical instructions. Mira, moving through the chaos, tended to the injured, her hands steady, her words soothing even in the terror of battle. Yet the siege was not without its cost. Smoke curled from scorched buildings, and the air was thick with the tension of impending loss. One of the young scouts stumbled and was caught in a miscalculated trap, injured but alive thanks to quick intervention. Every life mattered, and each loss weighed on the village's collective heart, deepening their resolve rather than breaking it. Hours passed like minutes, each attack repelled by clever defenses and tireless human determination. The soldiers, disciplined but unprepared for Emberfall's unpredictable strategies, faltered again and again. Lyra noticed their frustration, the subtle faltering of confidence. The humans were small, yes, but they moved with a rhythm the army could not predict. As the sun dipped lower, Elder Thomas called for a final coordinated push. Fires were lit in strategic positions to create smoke screens, while hidden crossways allowed defenders to strike from unexpected angles. Lyra and Joran led the rooftop teams, dropping stones and using pulleys to hurl heavy objects onto advancing soldiers. It was a display of human precision and coordination, of instinct sharpened by necessity. By nightfall, the army had retreated beyond sight, beaten back not by overwhelming force, but by the creativity, courage, and unity of Emberfall's people. The village, though battered, remained standing. Its streets were scarred and the air was thick with smoke, but its heart, the people, was stronger than ever. Lyra descended from the rooftops, her body exhausted but her spirit alight. She passed villagers tending fires, patching walls, and comforting the injured. Mira caught her gaze and offered a small, tired smile. "We did it," she said softly, though they both knew the battle was far from over. Elder Thomas approached, his gaze sweeping over the village. "Today, Emberfall showed the world something important," he said. "Humans are not just inhabitants of land, they are creators, survivors, and warriors of the mind and spirit. We endure because we refuse to be ordinary." Lyra clenched her fists, feeling a mix of exhaustion, pride, and defiance. She looked toward the darkened horizon, where the distant fires of the retreating army flickered like dying embers. "They thought it was just a village," she whispered. "Tomorrow we ensure they remember what humans are capable of." And in the quiet aftermath, as the moon rose over Emberfall, the village pulsed with life and resilience. Each heartbeat was a testament. Humans could turn even a humble village into a fortress, a symbol of ingenuity, courage, and unyielding spirit. The siege had tested them, and Emberfall had endured. Dawn crept slowly over Emberfall, painting the valley in pale gold. The village, though scarred by the day's siege, stood defiantly. Smoke curled from a few damaged rooftops and the scent of scorched wood lingered, but the people of Emberfall moved with purpose rather than despair. Lyra walked through the streets, her boots crunching over debris. Her hands ached from hammering, pulling, and lifting throughout the previous day, but her eyes burned with resolve. Every stone and splinter told a story of courage, a testament to human will. Children emerged from hidden corners, carrying small bundles of supplies. They ran messages, cleaned debris, and even helped rebuild minor barricades. Lyra smiled faintly. Their bravery reminded her that courage was not only in strength but in participation. Every hand mattered. Elder Thomas convened the villagers in the square. "The first battle is behind us," he said, his voice steady. "But victory is not just measured in survival. It is measured in preparation for the trials yet to come. Emberfall will not simply endure, it will thrive." Lyra approached him. "What if they return with greater force?" she asked, concern flickering in her amber eyes. "They will," Tomas replied quietly. "But we have learned something precious. Humans are more than strength. We are creativity, we are unity, we are courage, and those are forces no army can easily overcome." The villagers set to work. Blacksmiths reforged bent iron. Carpenters replaced broken planks, and every street was inspected for weaknesses. Lyra and Joran devised new mechanisms, ropes and pulleys for swift defense, smoke traps to obscure movement, and cleverly concealed spike barricades that could be deployed instantly. Each innovation was born from observation of the enemy, proof that human minds adapted faster than any machine. Mira tended to the wounded in the square, her hands gentle but efficient. She knelt beside a young scout, whispering encouragement even as she cleaned a shallow cut. "You are part of this village's heart," she said. "Every effort counts, no matter your size or age." As the day wore on, a subtle change settled over the villagers. The fear that had gripped them during the siege had not vanished, but it had transformed into a quiet determination, a steady pulse beneath the surface. Emberfall was no longer merely a village. It had become a living fortress built from ingenuity, courage, and an unbreakable human spirit. Lyra climbed to the highest roof once again, gazing over the valley. She could see the distant glimmer of the enemy's campfires, a reminder that their return was inevitable, and yet for the first time, she did not feel the weight of fear pressing on her chest. Instead, she felt a thrill of possibility. The humans of Emberfall had faced the impossible and lived. They had endured the test, and in doing so, they had learned the true power of their spirit. As night fell, the village gathered around the central fire. Families shared quiet meals, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. Stories were told of clever maneuvers, acts of bravery, and moments when ordinary villagers became heroes. Laughter mingled with the crackle of firewood, a delicate reminder that life persisted even amidst chaos. Elder Thomas raised his voice above the murmurs. "Remember this night," he said, "not because of fear or loss or the battles we have faced, but because of what we have created together. A village that was underestimated has become a fortress that carries not just stone and iron but human spirit." Lyra's gaze met Thomas's. "And tomorrow?" she asked softly. "Tomorrow," he said with a faint smile, "we ensure that Emberfall is remembered, not as a village that fell, but as the human heart that could not be conquered." The villagers looked toward the peaks, where distant winds whispered through the forests. Somewhere beyond the mountains the enemy plotted, but Emberfall no longer trembled. It had risen from ashes, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Lyra held her hammer close, feeling its weight not as a burden but as a promise. Emberfall would not merely survive. It would endure, and the world beyond the valley would soon understand that humans, underestimated for so long, could create wonders and withstand storms that no force could predict. And in the quiet of the night, as the moon bathed the village in silver light, Emberfall pulsed with life, unyielding, alive, and ready. The first light of dawn stretched over Emberfall like a silver banner, illuminating the village that had once been humble and quiet, now transformed into a fortress, alive with human spirit. Smoke rose from chimneys and fires lit the barricades, casting long, determined shadows. Every villager, young and old, carried the lessons of the previous battles. Fear transformed into focus, panic into purpose. Lyra stood atop the tallest rooftop, her amber eyes scanning the approaching army. The enemy advanced in a long, disciplined line, machines humming and soldiers marching with precision. This was no longer a scouting party. This was everything. And for the first time, the humans of Emberfall would face the full weight of the outside world. She turned to Elder Thomas, who stood beside her on the roof. "Are they ready?" she asked, voice steady though her heart raced. "They are," Thomas said softly, a calm fire in his pale eyes. "But so are we. Humans endure not because the path is easy, but because we refuse to bow to what others see as impossible." "Remember that," Lyra nodded. She signaled to Joran and the other defenders. Everyone knew their roles. Every trap, every barricade, every hidden path had been meticulously prepared. But beyond tactics, there was something more. An invisible strength, a collective courage that no army could measure. The first attack came with a roar. Machines rumbled, attempting to crush the eastern barricade. Soldiers surged forward, confident that numbers and technology would overwhelm a small village. But Emberfall's people were ready. Traps released logs that toppled toward advancing forces. Hidden pits and spikes slowed their advance. Fires sent clouds of smoke into the air, confusing and disorienting. Lyra led a rooftop strike team, hurling heavy stones and pulling ropes that dropped barriers with perfect timing. Joran coordinated the street-level defenders, directing each family with precision born of necessity. Mira moved between positions, tending the injured and encouraging the fearful. The village itself became a single organism, a network of minds, hearts, and hands working as one. Hours passed and the army faltered. They had expected to break the village with force, but human ingenuity could not be crushed. Every maneuver the soldiers made was countered by clever strategy, decoy paths, surprise attacks, and traps set with a knowledge no machine could predict. Amid the chaos, Lyra caught sight of the youngest children moving silently along a hidden passage, carrying stones and messages. Her chest swelled. Emberfall was more than stone and wood. It was courage, it was hope, it was humanity at its finest. By late afternoon, the army began to retreat, exhausted and outsmarted. The villagers, though weary, did not cheer wildly. Their triumph was quiet, solid, a steady heartbeat that affirmed their resolve. Emberfall had survived, not by power, but by unity, by brilliance, and by an unyielding human spirit. Elder Thomas approached Lyra, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Do you see what we have done?" he asked. They thought this was a village. But look at it now. We turned fear into strength, doubt into strategy, and ordinary people into a fortress. The world will not forget this. Lyra looked over the streets, rooftops, and barricades. She saw neighbors supporting one another, children learning courage, and even the elderly moving with quiet purpose. Every scar on the village was a story, every mark a triumph. "We've done more than survive," she said. "We've shown what humans are capable of." Night fell over Emberfall. Stars shimmered above the peaks, reflecting in the eyes of those who had faced the impossible and won. The village was battered but alive, a living monument to human resilience. In the quiet, Lyra whispered to herself, "They thought it was just a village, but they were wrong. This is humanity." And in that moment, Emberfall was no longer just a village or a fortress, it was a symbol, a beacon of ingenuity, courage, and unyielding spirit. The humans within it had transformed not only their home, but the way the world would remember them. The soldiers who returned to the outside world carried stories of an impossible village that could not be broken, stories that would ripple far beyond the valley. And the humans of Emberfall, united in heart and mind, had learned a truth older than time, that courage, ingenuity, and resilience are the strongest fortresses of all. As the moon rose over the valley, Emberfall glowed softly in silver light, alive with the unbroken heartbeat of humanity. And the world, for all its armies and machines, would never forget the village that refused to be ordinary.